Hello friends, welcome back to Cosmopolitan Cornbread. So I didn't do a garden tour this week because I usually film them on Sundays, and Sunday morning I woke up with a pounding, wretched migraine. I don't get them very often, but this was a doozy, and there was no filming anything that day. And so I didn't get my garden tour filmed, but I did want to come out today and to have a little bit of garden chat. Something that I was asked in my last garden video was about fertilizers. Of course, I do use fertilizers, especially because my garden right now is still kind of new. This is only the second year that I've planted my garden here. It takes time to build an ecosystem in the soil and to really build healthy soil. So I'm definitely using some fertilizers at this point. Even when the garden soil is healthy, I still fertilize, but it doesn't need it as much. So the fertilizers that I use, and I have a variety of them, and I kind of rotate between them all. One of the brands that I use is Down to Earth. This one specifically is for acidic things like blueberries, thus the blueberries on the box. I'm all out of a different box that I usually have on hand, and it is for starting seeds. It's specifically formulated for baby plants, for like when you're transplanting them, or when you're starting your seeds, if you want to start off with some slightly fertilized soil. So it's same brand, it's the Down to Earth brand, all natural fertilizers, and I usually have the acid mix for things like blueberries. It's good for azaleas, rhododendrons, things like acidic soil. I usually keep the starter one in stock stocked up in the greenhouse of the same brand, and then sometimes I'll use their all-purpose just general garden fertilizer as well. They have a bunch of different ones. A couple other fertilizers that I use pretty often. This one is Garrett Juice. It's not a high, it's not really high in like nitrogen or anything like that. It's very low. It's 1.5, 2.2, and 1.5. But this is, it's completely natural and organic, but this is actually really good for your soil when you are trying to build up that ecosystem in there. It kind of helps with the probiotics a little bit because it has compost tea, molasses, seaweed, apple cider vinegar, and hydrolyzed fish and water. So it's really good for creating healthy soil, creating that ecosystem. That's why it is one of my ingredients for my fire ant spray that I use for getting fire ants out of my garden beds without having to use, traditional pesticides or anything like that, because you don't want to use that stuff in your garden. Another thing that I use on a pretty regular basis, and y'all, I will tell you, I personally wouldn't want to use this if you don't have your garden fenced in because this stinks. It is literally ground up and fermented fish. Stinky, stinky, stinky. But it is also completely, organic. But it stinks. And when I have used this, or when I used this in Alabama, and we had a garden, we had a good fence around our garden. And I had cameras up all around my garden because I just like to have cameras everywhere. Every time I use this, there would be raccoons circling around my garden. But the fence that I had there around my garden was a traditional farm fence, field fencing, but I had hot wires. So if anything tried to climb that fence, it got zapped, and they learned not to do that. But anytime I use this, because you could smell it like crazy, this fermented, ground up fish goo, it drew in animals, stray cats, things like that. And then a couple other fertilizers that I use, and I use these ones pretty regularly. Number one, I use Epsom salt because it's magnesium. It's very important for plants, especially like tomatoes or melons. If you start seeing blossom end rot, that is a deficiency. And usually it's a deficiency not only in magnesium, but also calcium. And so I have this, which is CalMag. It's calcium and magnesium together. And this is a liquid fertilizer, which these pretty much all are. Well, this one's a powder, but these liquids, you know, you dilute them in water. A lot of them you can use as a foliar spray, so you can nourish from the leaves and the stems as well as in the roots. But this one, it's primarily calcium and magnesium. So if you're really dealing with blossom end rot, this is definitely something you might want to look into. Now, what's really important about this is making sure that you're using fertilizers that are water soluble. That means the nutrients are readily available for your plants to suck it up with the roots. You know, calcium, most people know your soil needs calcium for your plants to be healthy. And often what people will do, and I used to do this, is crush up eggshells and put them in the soil around, like, say, your tomato plants and things like that. I used to put it in the hole when I put the tomato plant in. The problem is the calcium in the eggshell is not readily available for your plants. It takes a long time for the calcium to break down in that eggshell. I mean, if you've ever had a compost bin and you've thrown in eggshells, and you know, maybe you've got the rotation thing, you can have compost that's a year old and you dig into that and you're going to find eggshells that look like the day you threw them in there. It takes a really long time. So having something that is calcium but is liquid and nutrient available for your plants is very helpful. And along those lines, this is kind of an all-around, all-purpose fertilizer. I started using this last year. This is a really strong fertilizer when you've got plants that are desperate and your soil is garbage. This one is really beneficial. It is 20-20-20. So it's very strong in everything. Now, I don't use like just one. I kind of rotate between all of them. So like maybe one time I'll use this, the next time I'll use this, maybe the time after that I'll mix some Garrett Juice and some fish fertilizer together, and I just kind of do a rotation. So this one, it's Jack's all-purpose water-soluble plant food with micronutrients, and again, it's 20-20-20. This is a powder, but it instantly dissolves in water. So there's a little scoop in there. You just put it in your watering can, or I just use a great big 5-gallon bucket, and I mix up 5 gallons at a time, and I take this little pail right here, and I just fill it up, and I just walk along, and I just pour it into all of the plants, and then I just scoop it up again, and I just keep on going, because I used to use my watering can and it just took forever because you could only mix up a little bit at a time. And so I just use a great big 5-gallon bucket, and it usually takes me 5 or 6 5-gallon buckets to do all of my plants here in the garden. So, and I do that with all of these except for when I use this one, because it is just your granulated powder. But yeah, so those are kind of like all of the different types of fertilizers that I use, at least the ones that you can buy. I do also make, well, I used to, I haven't done it yet here, comfrey tea. Basically take a bunch of comfrey leaves, put them in water, let them soak until they're stinky and nasty and it smells horrible, and then you just take that tea and you dilute it and you water your plants with it. Comfrey grows super deep roots. It can get way down into the ground, like 6 feet or more. and it can reach nutrients that other plants can't get to, and it pulls it up into those leaves. You chop those leaves down and you can make a comfrey tea out of them, and all of those nutrients go into that water for your other plants. You can also chop the comfrey down and just lay it down on top of the soil around your plants. All the nutrients will kind of break down and do it kind of like a mulch, and the leaves will break down really quickly, and all of those nutrients will just go down into the soil. When we lived in Alabama, we grew corn a couple of times, and I had a lot of comfrey established there, and I would actually just take all those leaves and just put them all down the rows in between the corn. But yeah, so this is generally what I do. I mean, you can also use manure, of course, like your animal manure, to make a tea as well, just like the comfrey. I would just, you know, be very careful. Make sure that you know that whatever your animals are eating is not contaminated with grazon or any other herbicide. That was the issue that I ran into last year. You know, I had just planted my entire garden that I had started all from seed, except for the handful of plants that I had picked up at the feed store because I can't resist. You know, but I'd spent weeks and weeks growing all of these baby plants and stuck them in the soil, and they all just immediately died. Well, almost all of them. And it was grazon contamination. So just make sure if you're using manure, whether it's from your own animals or animals that you know, the neighbor down the road, the farmer down the road or something, just make sure it isn't contaminated with grazon. Now, that said, a lot of people use the manure in a bag for their garden, for their soil. A test that you can do, and it's something, you know, I wish I'd have known about, to make sure that your manure is not contaminated with any kind of herbicide, is take a bag of grocery store pinto beans or kidney beans, pinto beans, whichever ones you got on sale, super cheap. Get a tray with some starter soil or a big pot. Tray works great because you don't need anything deep because you're not going to grow this for long. Take that tray of soil, take those grocery store beans, throw them in there, let them start germinating, let them start coming up, because beans grow super fast, and beans are very sensitive to herbicides. And take some of that manure or that composted manure, put it in some water. Just, you know, you don't need much, just take a little bit, put it in some water, let it sit for a day or two, strain it out, and then use that water to water those baby bean plants. If those baby bean plants, those little seedlings, are fine, then your compost is fine. If, however, your baby bean plants suddenly start dying because they're super sensitive to herbicides, then you know your compost that you bought or the manure that you're using, you know it's contaminated, and do not use it on your garden. That is it. I will put links. I do have an Amazon store, and there is a garden section where you can see all of these things, but I will put a link specifically to all of these fertilizers that I showed you or that I mentioned today in the video description down below. So that is it for today. If you have any questions about any of this, just leave them in the comments down below and I'll be sure to answer them. So thanks for spending time with me here again at the homestead. God bless, and I'll talk to y'all next time.